Hey guys, it's Courtney, and I am going to do a quick video, well, not really quick, but somewhat quick, kind of going over my favorite things that I use in the craft room over and over and over and over. Some of them are going to be quite obvious and maybe kind of geared towards the newer card maker or paper crafter, and others maybe for everybody. So I'm going to start off with the least expensive things that I grab on for pretty much every project, starting with my white gel pen. So my favorite one is the Uni-Ball Signo pen, which I have a piece of foam tape stuck to. No surprise in my craft room, but this one is my favorite. I find this to be a little bit more opaque, and I don't know, the ink inside of it is a little bit thicker in my opinion. But I also do have the Jelly Roll pen, which also works very well. I know there's several brands out there, but these are the two I grab the most, preferably this one. But this can add highlights to your coloring. This can add detail. You can add like stitching to a darker piece of cardstock, and you can fix mistakes. So if you go out of the lines with your coloring or anything, you can fix a lot of mistakes with these. So I grab a white gel pen pretty much for every single card I make. So speaking of mistakes, there's two other items that I reach for on a regular basis to fix mistakes. And the first is the sand eraser. Oh, and by the way, the gel pens, which I will link below, a couple different sources, but you can get one for like $2 or $3. So the sand eraser is great for any smudges that you might get on cardstock. It's an eraser, but it's really, I guess it's sand eraser. So it's a little bit more, it's not as bendy, and it's a little bit more, it's got a little bit more stability to it. And the key to this is to not add too much pressure. Take a little bit away at a time. If you add too much pressure, the strength of this thing can rip paper. So if you just go really lightly, you may have to go over the same area more than once, but this will pretty much remove any smudges that you may get. Another thing is the adhesive eraser. I like to use wet glue, which I'll talk about a little bit. And sometimes we get a little bit that squishes off, or we get some on our fingers and it transfers over to our projects. Once the adhesive is dry, you have to wait for it to be dry, this will take it off. Because we know, especially the type of adhesive that I typically use, it leaves behind a sticky residue and everything will cling to that. So I have pets, a lot of people have pets. Hair will stick to it. So I always make sure that the adhesive is completely dry. And this is kind of a weird texture too. And you can see that it does get kind of dirty. I usually just take my scissors and snip off the little edges, or else this dirt that's kind of stuck on here because it's adhesive, will transfer over to your project. So I just take scissors and snip those areas off. But two very, very inexpensive items that will save many of your projects. I think they go for $2 or $3, but again, I'll link a couple of sources below if you're looking for these. Another thing that will save you is an embossing bag or an embossing anti-static tool before you do your embossing. This one is from Scraperfect. And I like it because it has this little handle on it that you can hold on to, because a lot of people don't like to touch this powder. You can kind of hold on to this. I don't mind the powder. You can see I keep it in this little dish here, because it does get powder everywhere. But this one is pretty amazing. It does work very, very well. But I know Ranger makes them. Inkadinkado makes one. There's multiple different brands that make them. And again, very inexpensive, couple dollars, and it will really work well with your embossing. You won't get any of that stray embossing powder in places that you don't want it to go. So when we talk about adhesives, these are all liquid adhesives, which is my preference, mainly because I can't line things up. It's just something that I struggle with. I struggle with lining things up correctly the first time, and wet glue gives me a couple of seconds to kind of shift things around the way they need to be shifted. The first one is Glossy Accents, which I don't typically use as an adhesive. I use it more as to kind of embellish my cards. You can add shine, you can add like a glass texture. You can even just use these as kind of like just drops on your card. but it is also an adhesive. So if you are running low on adhesive or you can't locate it, like I can sometimes not locate things on my desk, grab your Glossy Accents because it will work as adhesive. But I use this often. I love the look of this. I add this to word sentiments, or word sentiments, obviously, word dyes, and it really adds a little bit more texture and some shine. Another one I use is the Zig two-way glue, and I don't use this for my actual projects. I use this to restick my mats for my cutting machines. So I have a Cricut and I have a Scan and Cut, and I hate buying mats. Cricut is not so bad. I think they're about the same price, but the Cricut mats seem to last a lot longer. But Scan and Cut mats are really never sticky to begin with, in my opinion, and I don't want to have to keep buying them, so I restick them. And the way this goes is, I haven't used it in a long time, but let me get the top off here. It's kind of like one of those paint pens that I just splattered all over, so you have to kind of press this down to get it started, but it goes on blue, and I just kind of, if this were a mat, I just kind of go down the entire mat, and there is different sizes of this. I like this size just because I feel like I have a little bit more control over it. This is the broad tip, and again, I'll link that below. But you can see this is black cardstock, but it does go on blue, and it dries fairly quickly. I would say it's completely dry within maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And as it dries, and you can see in certain areas that it is becoming dry, it becomes clear, so you know when it's ready to go. Keep in mind that this will make your Scan and Cut mat stickier than a brand new mat. So you may have to kind of just tap your hand over the area where you're going to place your cardstock first, or else it may stick a little bit too much. But it will really prolong the life of your mats. And this, again, is just a couple of dollars, and mats are like 12. So I've definitely gotten my money's worth, and I think I've restuck probably 5 or 6 mats with this, and it's only about halfway gone. So definitely worth the money if you have a cutting machine. Now, my favorite adhesive to use on my projects is the Tombow multi-glue. Again, something that's very inexpensive. I know adhesive can get expensive, especially when we feel like we need all different kinds of it. Of course, I do have different kinds. I have double-sided tape and all of that, but the one I reach for the most is this. It gives me a couple of seconds to shift it around if I need to, but it pretty much sets within about 10 seconds. So it becomes permanent enough for me to continue on with my project, and I don't have to wait a whole long time for my drying. And if I don't use it on, like to stick one panel to another, it's repositionable once it's dry. So I can create masks from this. I can kind of stick down die cuts that maybe I want to do ink blending on or coloring on, and they're not going to budge, but they're not going to be permanent either. So if you just smear it around with your finger, it's repositionable. Again, pretty quick drying time. And you can probably use it in place of this. I wouldn't want to restick a whole mat, but if you have a couple of images to cut out with a Scan and Cut, just dab a couple of dots of this on the outer edges of your card panel or your cardstock, smear it around, and then stick it on your mat, and you should be good to go running this through your Scan and Cut. So another thing I use often, and I guess this isn't really adhesive, but this is fun foam, and this stuff is from Walmart. It is in the kids craft section, and usually you get a whole big pack of it. I get the multicolored just because it's super cheap, but it has adhesive on one side. And depending on the paper trimmer that you have, it's very, very easy to cut down to size. I always cut mine just a little bit smaller. Cat hair on that too, along with everything else. Cat hair always seems to stick to fun foam. But this will give you dimension to your panel. Usually I only use these for larger panels without wasting all of that foam tape, which of course I always use for smaller items. But very inexpensive, a few dollars for a big, huge pack of it. And they're all 8.5 by 11, so you can just trim them down to whatever size you want them to be. So speaking of trimmers, these are the 2 trimmers that I reach for the most. I have one other one, and it's a 12 by 12. It's the, oh, I can't think of the name of it because I don't use it often. I only use it when I'm making my card bases, but it's the green one. Somebody will know the name of it. But I've had it for years because I don't use it very often. But in my everyday card making, I use the 8-inch Tonic trimmer, which is the guillotine trimmer. And this is, I use, you know, for mainly everything. It's got the little dotted lines for exactly the 5.5 by 4 1/4. So if you're into making A2 cards, you don't have to kind of look at the measurements. You know, this dotted line is where you need to be. And then the little mini Tonic trimmer, I love for sentiment strips or anything small that I really want to trim. I feel like I have a little bit more control with this one when I'm cutting something very, very small. And again, these are not that bad. I've had my Tonic, well, I've had this one for about 1.5 years because when I moved, I broke mine. But other than that, you know, this is only the second one I've ever had because they last so long. And this is the first of the minis that I've had. And I probably had this for about 2 or 3 years too. And I've had no issues. If they ever start to get a little bit dull, and you'll know when your paper's not as crisp, take a couple of pieces of aluminum foil, fold it up, and just cut it. Cut it a couple of times and that will sharpen up your blade a little bit and you should be good to go. So unless like you rip off the handle like I did, these will last you a very, very, very long time. Another fairly inexpensive item that I use in my craft room is, well, I have lots of these. This is a self-healing cutting mat, and you can see that I've cut it in half. And it's basically the same thing as what I work on. I order these from Amazon. They were very cheap. The price have seemed to go up a little bit, but still pretty inexpensive. And I had a clear one that when I first started doing YouTube, I experimented with all the different mats, what would have the least amount of glare and things like that. And I had gotten a clear one. Well, it turns out that doesn't work well for filming, but it does work great for my die cutting machine. I have a regular size Gemini, so cutting this in half was the perfect size. And I just use this in place of the bottom cutting mat. Or cutting plate, I should say. The cutting plates are like $20 or $30, and I'm not gonna spend that. I've used this cutting mat probably for about 1.5 years now, and you can see that it's in perfect shape. It's dirty, but it's, you know, I don't have the warping to it or anything, and you can use this pretty much in any die cutting machine. It doesn't have to be a Gemini. You'll just have to kind of measure to see how small or how large you need to cut it. And I just cut mine with a like a box cutter, or what do they call it, a utility knife or something. I don't know, I'm not into tools, but you guys know what I mean. And it was really easy to cut, very, very easy to cut. I just used a straight edge. And you'll just kind of have to play around with your sandwich because this one is a little bit thinner than the actual Gemini cutting plate. I usually do have to add an extra shim, but again, it will depend on your die cutting machine, and will also depend on which self-healing cutting mat you're using, because those are different thicknesses as well. So just play around. Don't force it through your die cutting machine. If it's not going through somewhat easily, don't try any further. Try to take a shim out. Just kind of play around. And once you got it, and you'll never forget it. And it will last you for, well, at least for 1.5 years and still going strong. So next we're going to talk about paper. And I get a lot of questions. For those of you who have ever received a card from me, you may be one of those people who ask me this question, is what card bases do I use? I know a lot of people use the 110-pound Nina Solar White. Very expensive. This is actually by Mohawk, and it is called Bright White Smooth Coverweight Cardstock. It's 110 pound, and this is actually a local place to me. This is actually a local paper mill that makes this, and that's how I got to try it. And I love it. I love it. It's like half the price of the Nina. It's so smooth, it feels like silk. Not the best for coloring. I have colored on it, but it's not the best. It's not as good as Nina for coloring, but if you're just using it for card bases, you're going to get a nice, thick, sturdy card base, and it's going to be super smooth, super, super smooth. So I really love this stuff. I will link it below if anybody is interested in this. Now, while we're on the subject of paper, I'm not going to bring out a ream of Nina Solar White, but I get a lot of questions about whether I've tried this paper or that paper or this paper when it comes to my alcohol marker coloring. And I'm all about saving money where I can save money, but there's also things that I won't cheap out on. And I think paper for my alcohol marker coloring is one of those things. And it all depends on the colorist that you are. If you guys have ever seen my channel, you know that I am a colorist, and that is 90% of what I do. So I need a very good paper that I know is not going to bleed. I know it's going to be able to withhold 4, 5, 6 color blends, you know, things like that. And I find that the Neenah Solar White Classic Crest 80-pound cardstock is my favorite. I buy it by the ream, and I typically cut it down into panels, you know, not all of it, but a majority of it. So all I have to do is grab one as I go. I'm a scene builder, so most of the time I don't even have to cut it down. I have tried the Copic Express. I think it's called Express. I don't know. I'll link it below. I had a few sheets. A crafty friend of mine had sent me a couple of pieces of different kinds of paper just to kind of try out. And I did like them. I did like them all. One of them was the MFT, and one of them was the Spectrum Noir alcohol marker, or Spectrum Noir paper, or whatever it's called. I liked all of them, and they actually all performed very similar to the Neenah. They were able to withhold all of the ink that I added to the paper without any bleeding. I got really nice crisp lines when I stamped. No issues with those at all. I just find that for the amount of paper that I go through, the Neenah is the best way to go for me, because I go through so much of it. But if you're every once in a while colorist, you know, look at other options as well. Like I said, the MFT one is good. The Simon's Stamp one is good. Spectrum Noir and the Copic paper is very good. But I prefer to stick to the Neenah. I have tried the less expensive ones that some people use, and they may be good for you. I'm not by any means telling you what paper you should get or what you shouldn't get, because like I said, it depends on what kind of colorist you are. If that is not the main focus of your card, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you are adding a cute little image and you just want to get the coloring done because you want to assemble the card, you're going to keep it nice and simple, the less expensive paper is probably fine. It's probably fine. Don't spend a ton on paper if it's not the main focus of your card. It is usually the main focus of my cards, so that is why I need to have the best paper. But I've even heard some people use the Michaels brand. I've tried the Michaels brand. I get bleeding all over the place. But then again, I do a lot of shading. I do a lot of the different techniques with the Copic, so I'm adding a whole lot of ink to that paper, and it can't withhold it. But for you, it may be fine. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with just coloring in an image solid with one color of a Sharpie even. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different style of card making. So depending on what your style is and what your goals are, that should determine what type of paper you should get for alcohol marker coloring. Watercolor paper, I don't have any. I typically stick with Canson. Canson XL, or there's another one too that's a little bit more expensive, but I'm not a watercolorist. I mean, I'm not good at it. I like it, but I'm not good at it. So I'm not too picky with that, because I don't think any of them is really going to make too much of a difference. Same thing with the alcohol markers. I'm not a watercolorist, so I don't need the super expensive watercolor paper, because no matter what kind of paper I get, it's probably it's just not going to look good. But I also use the Bristol Smooth for like my zigs and stuff like that, but I'll link it all below. But I don't, paper is not something I usually skimp out on. So as we're talking about coloring, if you guys have never seen my videos before, I'm typically a Copic user. I love my Copics. They are my most prized possession, and Copics are not for everyone. So if you are watching a video that has a lot of alcohol marker coloring and they're using Copics, keep in mind that it all depends on what you want your end results to be. The main mistake that I see people make is that they start off with a cheaper set to kind of get the feel of alcohol marker coloring, which I'm not against at all. And then they get another cheaper set because they weren't happy with that cheaper set. Then they get a third cheaper set because they still aren't happy with those two cheaper sets. And in the end, after 3 or 4 years and thousands of dollars later, they start investing in Copics, when they could have probably had the whole collection of Copics and some refills had they just invested in the Copics to begin with. My recommendation, if you are going to start alcohol marker coloring, or if you want to try it before investing in Copics, I am not against trying something less expensive. Don't get a whole set. Please don't get a whole set. Buy a Copic blending trio, 3 markers, that's it, and get the feel of them, see if it's something you enjoy before investing in more. Or you can get like the individual packs, not the individual packs, but it's got like 5 or 6 markers in it of the Spectrum Noir. I know Arteza has the smaller packs. Don't buy the whole set, because if you love it and if you happen to be good at it, and something that you want to keep working on, more than likely you're going to invest in these babies anyway, in the long run. So don't waste a ton of money on inexpensive markers, because in the end, they become expensive when you have 4 or 5 sets of them. I'm not by any means telling you to go out and buy Copics, but just keep that in mind as you're getting more and more and more alcohol markers. Is this something that you want to really get good at? Or is it just part of the card? Or is it the card? So that's what I would definitely ask yourself before you waste a ton of money. I didn't waste a ton of money, but I wasted some. I got the really, really old Spectrum Noir, very old. They don't even make them anymore. And I didn't like them, didn't use them. Got the chameleon markers, didn't like those, didn't use them. And then I got the Copics. So had I just taken, I don't think either one of them were that expensive, but they were still probably $300 or $400. Had I had that $300 or $400, I could have gotten a really nice start on my Copic collection right from the beginning. So a couple of regrets I've made, in my 10 years of card making, and I've wasted a lot of money. I've wasted a ton of money over the years. So just kind of keep that in mind. And this goes for any medium. This doesn't go just for alcohol markers. It could be colored pencils. If that's going to be your main focus and you really want to master the colored pencil, please don't get the $10 a pack for a whole set of colored pencils. Go for the better ones. Start off with Arteza. Arteza is a great brand, or Arteza, however you say it, is a great brand to start with, regardless of what you want to try, because you're not going to spend a ton of money, but you're going to get the feel of that medium. So that's just my advice. But obviously my Copics are one of my most used items, and I don't know what I would do without them. So last, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of cleaning up your area, keeping everything not necessarily organized, but kind of cleaning as I go. Now, for my stamps, I use the they're not stamp chamois, they are just regular chamois, the absorber. I bought these at Walmart. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them I believe you can get them at like hardware stores. And I have even heard that some people have been able to get them in the dollar store. Not sure. I haven't gone to the dollar store in many, many, many months. But certainly check that. I think I get 8 stamp chamois out of one roll, and it's really just a few bucks. And they last a while. You just have to wet them down before each crafting session, but very, very inexpensive, and you'll save a ton of money by not buying the actual stamp chamois. Nothing against those, they work great, but these are just a less expensive option. I also like the Scraperfect Best Cleaner Ever, and I need to get more of this, but I really like this stuff. I have cleaned my mat with it, I've cleaned my hands with it, I've cleaned my MISTI with it, and I've cleaned my stamps with it. So I have a little scrubber thing. I think it's honestly from Stampin' Up or something that I've had for many, many years and never used because they didn't have the solution. I squirted some of this on it and it takes it right up. Regardless of what kind of ink you use, regardless of how long you let the ink sit on your stamp, because you forget to clean it afterwards, this will take it off. And again, not very expensive. You only need like 1 or 2 sprays, because I've had this for quite a while, and I really, 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 really recommend this. Also recommend having some isopropyl alcohol in your craft room. Again, cleaning your mats will clean your mats. I know that a lot of people who use the glass mat, I usually do too when I'm not recording, when I'm not filming, use the hand sanitizer, which I don't know about you guys or where you live, but hand sanitizer is not an option here. Even isopropyl alcohol is not an option here, but I've had 2 bottles of it in my stash for a while, and I use this. I usually get the 90%, but again, I have to kind of get what I can get now. I clean my mats with it. I clean my Copic caps with it. And sometimes when I do a video, I often put the cap like this so that you guys can see what color it is, and it leaves behind that little ring. And I can just clean that up with alcohol because it's an alcohol marker, so it's going to clean it right up. So definitely recommend having this in your craft room. You can even get the alcohol wipes if you can get your hands on it. Hopefully things will get better soon. And last but not least is the Swiffers. This is the Swiffer duster. It's got a handle that you can put on there, but I don't usually even use that. And I honestly usually just use regular Swiffer cloths that you use on the floor. And this will take up any of that embossing powder that you happen to spill, or the anti-static powder, or even glitter. It will take it right up, so you don't have that big, huge mess. I know a lot of people love glitter, but they hate using it because it makes a mess. And this will really help. It will clean it up. It will really just have everything kind of cling to it. So I always keep one of these in here as well. So that is my most used things. Of course, there's so many other things that I use on a regular basis, but I can tell you that everything that I showed you here today, I probably use at least once a day. When I have a crafting day anyway. So I will link everything below. If you guys have any questions, certainly leave it in the comments below or contact me somehow, some way. And I look forward to the next video. Bye guys.